Hi guys, this video is all about top 10 topics according to me जो हर Spring Boot डेवलपर को आना ही चाहिए अगर स्पेशली आप इंटरव्यू प्रेप कर रहे हो। तो ये टॉपिक्स डिफरेंट वीडियोस में है ऑलरेडी, पर मैंने सोचा कि टॉप 10 टॉपिक्स डाल देता हूँ ताकि आप ये वीडियो को जरूर रेफर करो अगर आपका इंटरव्यू आने वाला है या फिर आप Spring Boot डेवलपर हो 2-3 साल एक्सपीरियंस, तो अब भी आपको ये कॉन्सेप्ट आना ही चाहिए। अगेन ये टॉप 10 टॉपिक्स अकॉर्डिंग टू मी है, जितना मैंने Spring Boot पे काम किया है, तो मोस्टली ये कॉन्सेप्ट्स में काफी काम होता है प्रोडक्शन एप्लीकेशंस में, और इस कॉन्सेप्ट्स पे इंटरव्यूअर आपको काफी क्वेश्चंस पूछ सकते हैं। तो ये 40-50 मिनट का वीडियो है, अगर आप इसको अच्छे से कर दोगे तो आपका आधे से ज्यादा इंटरव्यू प्रेप हो जाएगा स्प्रिंग बूट कॉन्सेप्ट्स का। Hi guys, in this video we will discuss what is happening internally in the run method. Sometimes interviewer might ask you how Spring Boot works internally, because if you see, this is only one line which is starting your Spring Boot application. So as a Spring Boot developer, you should be aware like what is happening. So if I will go inside this run method of the Spring application dot class, and then you will see here. So let's try to find what is the main method. So this is the main method of run, and if you see, we have like around 30 to 40 lines of code, and inside that we have different methods. So as a Spring Boot developer, even if you don't know too much in deep, but you should able to tell the interviewer the high level steps which are happening in the run method. So we will check that out. So first is stopwatch. So this is just to start the timer so that you are aware the Spring Boot application started in 1 second or 2 seconds, right, or 3 seconds, just to track how much time it took to start the application. And then after that, it is doing configure headless property, because we don't need any display device to run the Spring Boot application. So that's why we are doing configure headless property. And then after that, what is happening, if you see, whatever arguments we are passing from the command line, it is picking up that arguments, and based on that arguments and based on the environment properties, if you are aware of Spring profiling concept, we have like different profiles Spring can manage based on environment, whether it's a dev environment or test environment, right? So all that things is happening in this step. And after that, you would have seen the banner gets printed whenever we run the Spring Boot application, right? So after that, the main step is this one, because here it is creating the application context. And if I go inside this, you will see they have switch statement based on two cases. One is either your application context can be servlet, and either it can be reactive. So how it is deciding? So internally, if it will check if you have Spring Boot starter web dependency. So if I go to pom.xml, so we are using this Spring Boot starter web. We are not using reactive dependency here, right? So based on that, this project will be considered as servlet web application. But if you are using all reactive things, then it will be reactive web application. So once a user finds what is your application context, it will do prepare context and refresh context based on all the things like context, environment, arguments, and in the refresh context, whatever controllers you have, whatever components you have, whatever dependencies, beans, whatever you have written in your Spring Boot, which you want Spring Boot to load at runtime on the all the beans, configurations, components, right? So all these things are happening at this step. And after that, stopwatch dot stop. So if I go to terminal here, so let's say if I will run this one, Maven Spring Boot run, so the run method is being called. So if you see here, this banner, this was the banner which I was talking about, which is happening. And if you see here, the stopwatch will start, and then in the last, you should be aware that this application started in how many seconds, right? So all that things are happening, and then it is using web application context based on the dependency in the pom xml. And then if you see, this is the profiles which is being set to default, and we are not sending anything in the argument list, so it is taking port as 8080 because it's a default port, right? So all that things are happening. Again, we don't have to be aware of very deep, but even if you explain the things which I explained to you now at the high level steps, you would be good for this question. Hi guys, in this video we will discuss how to apply validation to the post mapping. Basically same concept can be used for get mapping or put mapping, but sometimes interviewer can ask you, like if you have some post method, let's say register user, and inside this the user is passing you some object in the request body, and now you have to apply some validations, and then you have to register that user in the database. So what you will do, so one legacy way of doing is like we do in Java, like if user dot get age is not equal to 18, for example, right? So this is very legacy way of doing it, and you have to do lot of if else statement on all the fields and apply validations. So instead of doing all this if else in Spring Boot, we have one dependency which is known as Spring Boot starter validation, which is really helpful to automate all this validation process. So what I will do is, let's say the user is getting passed to the request body, then I will go to the request, I will go to the user class. Here you will see I have used some of the annotations which are coming from Spring Boot starter validation. And here what I am doing is I am saying name should not be blank. I'm using not blank annotation and saying if it's blank, right, send this message to the consumer. And then I'm also applying size. Their name should be minimum of 2 characters. If not, then message should be returned like this. So if you think from the Java perspective, if I have to do same thing by using if else, then how you will do, I have to write here if user dot get name dot length is not is less than 2, for example. Just I'm giving example. So you have to do a lot of if else statement. So instead of doing that, you can directly use these annotation, and here you can also pass maximum length. Let's say the name should not be greater than 20, and then the message can be name should be between 2 and 20 characters, right? And name is mandatory. Same thing for age, you can play with the validation. You can set minimum age as 18. If it's less than 18, then you show this message. And for email, you don't have to do a lot of regular expression, right? Because if you see, if you think, if you know the regular expression concept, you know, like in Java we will get the email and see the format is correct via regular expressions. But here you can simply use this email tag. It will take care of the format is correct or not. So now if I will run this application, and before running I want to show this code which I have written in the global exception handler, because if you see here, more than one validations can fail. And in the global exception handler, what I am doing is I am binding all the errors, and I am doing for each loop and sending as a bad request. So if I will run this application, and if you see here, if I am passing everything correct here, and if I will click on send, user registered successfully. If I pass age as 15, you will see, if you see here, right, even if we put all that tags, still the validation is not working, because one of the tag is very important which you have to put on post mapping. So here if you see, we have not given instruction to the Spring Boot that you should validate this body. So to do that, we have to use valid tag. So this annotation is very important. So what will happen, even if you use all these validations in your user class, but you are not using this valid annotation, then no validation will be applied on the request body. So now if I will run this code, so I will do maven spring boot run, and then if I will go here, now if I am passing the age as 15, you will see age should not be less than 18, and we only have one error. But let's say if I pass name as only A, then if you see here, we will get a 2 errors here saying that name should be between 2 and 20 characters. And if I pass some aman.com, which is not a valid email format, then it should give email should be valid. And if I pass everything correct, all the validations will pass. And then if I will trigger the request, the user will get registered successfully. So this is very important and very efficient way of doing validations on the request body. But the same concept again you can use on any of the mapping, like get mapping, put mapping. The only thing interviewer want to see is you are aware of the Spring Boot starter validation dependency and how you can use it. So the best example is for post mapping, but again it can be leveraged in any of the mappings in your Spring Boot code. I just downloaded the project from spring.io. The people who are new to Spring Boot, they can go to this website, select Maven, Java version, and there they can add dependencies. So let's jump into code. So here what I have done is I have created one database config file, and I have used this configuration annotation, and inside this I have used this value annotation to fetch these values from the properties file. So if you see, I have like db.server name, and then I have db.username, then I have db.server password, right? So these four properties, and then getters and setters. Yeah, so basically what will happen is value annotation will try to find this property in the properties file and in the resource folder, and will give the value at runtime, right? So if I go to the actual code, I have one URL here, database config, and here if you will see, we are fetching all the four properties with the help of getter method. So basically what it will do, it will get the value from this class, and this class will fetch the value from properties file. Okay, so we have here in the properties file, if you see, db.server name, username, server password, server port. So if I will run this code, right, so you will see like it's working fine. So the flow is like, when the starting point will be, we will hit this URL. This URL will go to the getter method of database config, and getter method will fetch the value of this, which is coming from our application default dot properties, this value. So if I go to localhost, and you will see we are getting server, we are getting username, password. And so if you have noticed, like the name of this property here, right, is not matching exactly with this properties mentioned in the properties file, right, because of the relaxed binding concept. So what Spring Boot does is, for each of the property mentioned here, right, for example server name, so it will try to find server name in the four cases. So first one is like, so this one is camel case, right, and then server name, it is in the kebab case, and then server underscore name, which is snake case, and then all caps but snake case, server name, right, caps. So if you see here also, I have mentioned server name in camel case, username in kebab case, server password in snake case, and server port in caps, right? So what Spring Boot will do at runtime is, it will try to find the property, right, which is mentioned in this value annotation in these four cases, so which is known as relaxed binding concept. So if interviewer will ask you, you can explain it like it works for these four cases: camel, kebab, snake, and caps case, right? And you can describe the flow which we discussed now. So this is about relaxed binding. Which is better, properties or YAML? So if you see here, by default Spring Boot works with properties file, and in the properties file we are giving the properties like this. But if you see, we have like lot of repetition in this, right? Like db dot is repeating because there is no hierarchy, right? Db dot is repeating, and in case let's say we have other properties, user dot service dot URL, right, something value, right? So if you see, the repetition keeps on increasing, right? I have to give this text so many times, like based on number of properties that service have, and then maybe user dot, then other property can be there, right? So if you see, the repetition keeps on increasing, and code readability is not that great here in my opinion. But if I go to the YAML file which I created, so I just clicked on resources, right click, new file, and application YAML. So what I did here is, if you see, it's a YAML file, so it's a markup language. So in this you can describe the hierarchy of the properties, so it's more readable, right? So whenever so as soon as I see this file, I know like these properties belong to DB, these properties belong to servers, and these are the two ways in which you can also maintain the list, right? So servers is a list, and it have two values, and this is also like a list of array, right? So these are the ways you can use, and it is a markup language, so it have like lot of benefits. So I will not go into detail like all the benefits of YAML, because our interview question is basically between properties versus YAML. So you can say to interviewer like, YAML, you prefer YAML because of the human readability and the less repetition of the code, and the best part is it offers hierarchy which is like human readable, and it is less error prone, right? So all that answers you can give to interviewer. So I will just remove. So what I will do here is, and if you want to impress interviewer more, right, so you can also say like application.yaml is not like by default activated in Spring Boot. So if I have to read from this, right, application YAML, so I have to use here additional tag here. So let's say I have to use enable configuration properties, and then I have to use this in the main file. If you see here, we have to use property source and class path I have giving like please fetch the values from this file, right? So if I will go to this file, it is YAML, right? So I will change to YAML TP, so we know like it's getting fetched from here. So now if I will run this code, right, so you will see it should pick up from the YAML file. So it's running. So once it's, this is just like if you will give this answer like in detail, right, instead of just explaining about readability and hierarchy, you will really put a very good impression on the interview. So if I will go here and if I will run this, we miss some one tag. So if you see, it's still not picking from the YAML file, right? So if I go hit here database config, so I think we have to here give configuration properties. Okay, so now if I will run this, so hopefully it should run now. So we have added like enable configuration properties and then configuration properties here. And if I will go there now, so if you will see, it is coming from the YAML DB. So you can give this answer to interviewer like we have to add these properties, and then in the main file you have to add this property source to pick from application.yaml. We need Spring profiles. So if you see here, right, I have like 3 application.properties file, right? So basically these are because your properties will differ in your local or dev environment and then test environment and then production, right? So that's why Spring offers you the profiling concept. So you can have different properties file, and inside each property you can have the values based on that environment, right? Let me run this code so it will be more clear to you guys. So what I will do, I will just remove the tags here, or I will just comment it. So we will use the properties file in this case. So I will let me comment, and then in the main file, so I will comment this line, right? So it will start picking up from application default. So if you see, if we like without any profile, right, it is always picking up from the application default properties. And then now let's try to pass the profile as prod, so we will able to validate if it's picking up from the prod file. So I will go here and I will use command to pass the profiles is equal to prod here. Okay, so spring boot dot run dot profile. So this can be set up in your Jenkins or whenever your code is deploying in any of the platform. So if I will run this now, so you will able to see like instead of default DB, the prod DB should start coming when we hit that URL. So it's running fine now. So I will go here. So you see the prod DB is coming. So what happened here is like we gave it profile as prod. So Spring Boot searched for application hyphen profile name, which is prod, and it picked up these properties, right? So this is how Spring profiling works. And also in your project, you would have seen like there is also like application.properties file, right? So what happened in this case is like how Spring Boot works is, for example, let's say from these properties, I will copy this. So based on the profile, it actually create application.properties file, okay, in the background. So what I will do, let's say application.prod. So I will just put one property here from here to properties here, right? And I will give it as, let's say 9090, right? So what will happen now is when as soon as I gave prod, right, profile, so it will append these 4 properties, or let's say, so for example, so I will mention this property in the prod also, so that the scenario will be clear. So now what will happen, like these all 4 properties will be copied in this one, and if you see this property is duplicated, right, so it will fetch the value which is present in the application prod, so it will override this value, right? So let's see if it works now. So that, because that means the default value is 8080, but if in case any of these properties file based on the profile is having any value, it will override the value and pick up the value from that file. So I think it's getting confusing. So let's run the code. So in this case, we have 9090 here. So I will change it to 8080, and we have 9090 here. Okay. So what should happen now is, so as soon as we hit the code, right, it should pick up 8080. It should not pick up a 9090. Okay. Now let's run the code again. So if you see here, so in the application prod properties, our port number is 8080, right? So if I will hit this, it's coming 8080, right? So now if I will call the test one, so I will remove this, and in the test one I will remove this one, right? For example, I remove, there is no port number in our test. So what will happen is it should pick up 9090. So now if I will pass the test profile, right, so you will see that the port number is coming from server port and 9090. So if I will go here, so you see test DB is coming and port number is coming 9090. So that's how it works. So it's not mandatory to have application.properties, but in case you want like some of the properties you want to mention by default here, right? And in case if it's mentioned in any of the profile property, then it will value will get overridden. So what I have did is I have created one file scheduled task example, and here what I have used configuration annotation, and then I have used enable scheduling annotation. So this annotation is very important. Without this, even if you have scheduled method inside, but if you miss to give this annotation, right, your scheduler will not run. So that's why you have to be very careful while writing the scheduled methods, because you might miss this and it will not run, right? So first thing you can always tell to your interviewer, like if we need to have schedulers in our Spring Boot, this annotation is very important, which is known as enable scheduling. And here I'm simply creating one function. So public void schedule task fixed delay. So if you see here, we are using here fixed delay is equal to 1000 millisecond, so which is equal to 1 second, right? So what I am saying is I want to run this method. So you can put any logic, right? In production, you might want to send some logs every second, or you might want to send logs every hour to other system, or you want to send some data every hour or every day to other systems. So there are a lot of production use cases, so there are a lot of schedulers. So myself also, I have worked on a lot of schedulers, because most of the production applications you want to combine the data and send the data to other systems at fixed interval, or maybe over the weekends also, and everyday batch also, right? So there are a lot of use cases in production. That's why these schedulers, if you're working on any a production application, so you have to use the scheduled methods there for any use case. So there are a lot of use cases. So in this case, what I'm saying is fixed delay is 1 second, so it should run every 1 second, right? Just for this example, but in production it can be 1 hour, 30 minutes, or anything. So now the same method I've created is with the fixed rate of 1 second, right? So interviewer might ask you like this all looks same, right? Only difference is fixed delay and fixed rate, right? So fixed delay you want to use when you want to track the previous execution also, and you don't want to run this logic in multiple threads. So what I mean is, like, let's say the first instance run with a fixed delay, right? But this task took 2 seconds. So this fixed delay will start after the task is finished. So if I say here, so what I mean by that is, let's say task A started, it started at, let's say, 10th second, and it took 5 seconds, right? So that means it got finished at 15th second, right? So task B will start after 15th plus whatever the parameter is there of fixed delay, in this case 1, right? So it will start at 16th second, not at 11th second, right? Because 10th second was the start of the task A, 15th second was end of task A. So task B will start 15 plus whatever fixed delay is there. So with the help of fixed delay, right, there will be never a case two threads are running it in parallel. Okay, so that's why you want to use the fixed delay in the scenarios. Let's say you're processing some customer data, right, and you don't want to process or start a new instance of a scheduler until the previous instance is working, right? So that's how you can work with fixed delay. But with the fixed rate, right, fixed rate will not track your previous executions. So in this case, if I take a same example here, so what will happen is task A, so task B will start at 11th second, right, and task C will start at 12th. So that means task B doesn't care about if task A is still executing or not, it will simply use this parameter and run this logic after every 1 second. Okay, so this is main difference between fixed delay and fixed rate. And for fixed rate, you can use this fixed rate, like if I have to push some logs, or where I have to push some other files, and it doesn't matter if previous instance is running, right? So in that case, you can use fixed rate. Okay, so now if I will run this, right, so let's run. So I will say Maven Spring Boot run. So you will see the both task will work, right? So fixed rate is working, fixed delay is working, fixed rate, fixed delay, right? So now let's take an example of fixed rate, right? So we said that, and this is very important concept. So let's say if I put here thread.sleep, right, and I put 3 seconds, and I will just put a try catch exception handler here. So now, according to our logical or theoretical explanation, right, so task A will run, let's say 10 second, it will take 3 seconds because we have put thread.sleep, right, and then it will finish at 13 second. But other task should run after 11, after 1 second each, right? But it will not happen by default. So if I will show you this, and let me comment this one, or let me increase the time, right? So we can see the example of fixed rate, whether it is running every second or it is waiting because of the thread.sleep. So you will see here, so fixed rate task work 780, right? But it didn't work at 781. It next instance executed at 83, 86, 86. So that means it is still waiting, right? This is happening because Spring Boot by default use only one thread. Okay, so that's why there is no more thread. So that's why we have to use one more annotation here, which is known as async annotation. So that's what you can tell to your interviewer also, which will give a really good expression. So now if I will run the same, right, program, so you will see it's not waiting for this task. So it will immediately run after every 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Even if each task is taking 3 seconds, it doesn't care. So with the help of async, you can really achieve that behavior of fixed rate. So this is how it works. In Cron expression, we have, if you see, the 6 attributes here, right? So what does that mean is, first one is seconds, second one is minutes, third one is hours, this one is day of month, this is month, and this is day of week, right? The star means the all instance. So that means this task will run on all days and on all months, right? And question marks mean any day of week, right? So that's how it works. So that means this method will run every day at 9:53 p.m. So if I will see my current time, right, it's 3:10 p.m, right? So I will say 15, and I will say here 11, right? So that means if I will run this program, it should run now, this task. So that's what this Cron expression means. So if you see, our fixed delay task ran, our fixed rate task is running every second for this example. And as soon as the 3:11 will come, right, in some seconds, this method will be picked up and it will run. So if you see here, the cron task, right? So as soon as it's 3:11 p.m. here, the cron task ran. So that's how you can use cron expression. So a lot of cron expression generators. So I'm using Java in use /cron. So because it will tell me the last execution and next execution also. So if you see here, like at 15:11, it should run every day. So if you see 19th, 20th. So now let's try to change some parameters. So this is our day of month, right? And this is our month. So let's say if I want only to run my batch, let's say in December, right? Just an example. So what will happen here is, so this batch will run at 15:11 in December month, right? So that's how it works. So if you see here, the next execution will start from the 1st December. So, and also you can change, let's say if I will say not, and in December, if you only want to run, on weekends, let's say, just an example. So I can say here Saturday, Sunday here. Then you have to change this to any. So now if you will see, it will run in December every day between Saturday and Sunday, right? So that's how you can do. So if I will say here star, so that means it will run every day whole year between Saturday and Sunday on this. And if you want to give specific second, you can play with it. And there are a lot of scenarios. Basically, you can play with these 6 attributes and create your own cron expression, whatever use case. So mostly in production, the use case can be product on weekend you want to run, or use case can be specific month also, like based on holidays and all. You can use zone also, because in some of the production scenario you want time zone like MST or something, right? So you can use zone also. And then you can also fetch this cron expression from application.config, right? In the last video we discussed about environment variables, so you can do that with the cron expression. Instead of hard coding here, you can directly fetch from the application file, and so that it will be easier for you to change in the future, right? So you can always mention it in the application file. So here, if you see, I have mentioned it here, so it will pick it from here and run it. And in the future, if you want to change, you can change it just here, and it will be changed in all the places wherever you are passing the cron dot expression. So let's first understand a little bit concept of AOP, like why we need AOP and what are the different terms which are being used when we talk about AOP. So AOP is aspect oriented programming, and why it is used? It is used to modularize the cross-cutting concerns, because let's say if you have very big application, right? So like some of the functionalities like logging, security, transactions, right? They are common functionalities, right? If even if you have, let's say, 50s of or hundreds of controllers, right? So for all of them you have to do logging, right? And at application level you have to do security and transactions and many other scenarios, right, which can be modularized or separated from the core application logic. So you don't have to rewrite every time, and then if you have to change something, right, then you have to change at hundreds of places. So to avoid all that things, in most of the projects they use AOP. So when we talk about AOP, so you have to understand these 3 terms first. So advice, right? So advice can be either before, it can be either after returning, it can be after throwing, it can be around. So these 4 advices are available. So basically, with help of advice, Spring Boot will know like when to execute this logic, right? Because there should be something we have to tell, right? Spring Boot, run my logic before running this method, or after running this method, or during running this method, or if exception is coming in the method, right? So these 4 advices we can give to Spring Boot with these tags, right? Before means this will run before execution of the program. After returning means once the method execution is completed. After throwing is if any method throws some error or exceptions, and around means before and after both, so basically around the method. So second thing, if you see here, right, so one thing is this is advice, so you have to really understand this carefully. And whatever you see here, right, so this is basically an expression which we call as point cut. Okay, so it is a point cut. So with the help of point cut expression, so in this example I'm telling the Spring Boot, when any method or any class within this package gets executed, then before execution of that method, run this logic. So you can say, let's say if you have 100 of controller and you want to print some log statement, right, before execution, so you can use this one line and it will be implemented, or it will be triggered whenever any call is being happened on any of the APIs present in the controller, right? So if I break down this one, right, this part is also very important. So if you see here, right, so this wildcard means any return type, because I want to implement on all the methods and classes. That's why I am saying I don't care about return type. So that's why I am giving this wildcard here. Okay, and then this is my package name here, this is my package name. So this part, right, so this part specify any class and any method within this package. So I am saying any return type, any class, any method, and any number of arguments. So these 4 things you have to take care, and you can modify based on the use case. Let's say if you have hundreds of controllers, right, so you want to apply on specific controllers which have specific return type. I'm just giving example. So that's why you can manipulate these 4 things to make your own point cut expression. So that's how it works. And this before means it will execute before any API is getting triggered inside the controller. After returning, it is same, we are giving point cut here, and we are also printing the result. So if you mention returning is equal to result, right? So we can also print result. And the most powerful is around. So after throwing a similar, like when any exception is being thrown, you can print exception here. And around is very important, because with the help of around you can calculate the execution time. So in this thing, what I am doing is, so I am saying, like whenever any method call is happening, right? Or let's say our API got triggered, so I am printing the start time here, and then I am using join point dot. So I'm using join point dot proceed, which is proceeding join point, right? So when this line will be triggered, method API logic will work, and after API logic is completed, I am again, calculating the end time, so which will be current time minus start time, and then we can log this thing in your logs, send to database. So this is very important concept here, which is very helpful if you want to log how much time all the API calls are taking. So I will run this program, add this package here, Spring Boot starter AOP. This is the package you need, and so you have to give this aspect tag here, right, on the class level. So these two things if you do, then it will work fine. And if I go to my this package controller, right, so web controller is a part of my controllers, and I have one API here, users, right, and user ID. So, and I have empty post API also saved, but I will just create like 2-3 more APIs, dummy APIs. So likes, right, and here I will just say get likes, and path variable I will remove. Here what we will do, we will just say hash map, just put, so this is just a dummy thing, okay, likes, so I will just say 10. So here I'm giving thread.sleep as 2, and here I'm giving thread.sleep 1, just to see if our logging is working fine. Okay, so now we have like two APIs, like get likes, and we have get users. So I will just run this method, run this project. Project is running, so I will trigger the API now, users 1 2 3 4, right? So now, and I will also trigger the other API, so which is likes, right? So here I triggered one time this API, and I triggered one time this API. So now if I go to the logs, right? So first thing is, this is our start time, which we printed here in the logging around. So around advice got triggered, and this start time got printed. And then before advice got triggered, which is here, and we are printing before advice here. And after returning advice, when the method got executed successfully, so after returning, if you see this statement result, and we are printing result here, right, object result, right? So it is also giving us the JSON here. So if you see name John, ID 1 2 3 4, right? And then with the help of this line, the method got executed, right? And then if you see, with the help of this line, we were able to print like executed in 1006 millisecond, because we have thread sleep of 1 second, right? So 1000 plus 6 millisecond it took, so a total time it took is 1006 millisecond. And this is our path of the API which got triggered. And same thing happened for second API, same thing. Here is our JSON, likes is equal to 10, and we have thread.sleep of 2000 millisecond, that's why it came here 2000. Okay, so in this way, now once my this logic is ready, right? So if you see, this is very small class, just 50 to 60 lines, right? Just 50 lines and even less, right? And if I remove all these methods, and if I only need this method, right, so it is just a, you can see, just a 15 lines of method. But with the help of this 15 lines, right, no matter if I have 100 of controllers, no matter how many APIs I have in my controller folder, now I don't have to add the code everywhere. And even adding is fine, but it's really a headache for developers if they want to change the logic, right? Because let's say in future, if they want to add some other logic to send this data to some other file, logging database or something, right, then I just have to make database call here, or I just have to save in file here, and this logic will keep work on all the controllers. And I can also play with the wildcards, and I can also play with the advices here. So this is all about AOP. So from the interviewer perspective, the interviewer will ask you this question just to see your conceptual knowledge, and even the system design knowledge a little bit, because in this you are using, like, you are doing modularization, and you are separating the core application logic from the repeated concerns, or you can say the concerns like logging, security, transactions. So you're not mixing all that common concerns with the application logic. So it's really good. So you can tell interviewer about advice, you can tell about point cut, you can tell about join point, and if the interviewer is giving you hands-on, you can just create simple aspect file and you can just demo like around method, which is very useful and which can be really used in a lot of places. And you can just write this 10-15 lines and show this demo, whatever I show you now. So Actuator basically gives us production ready features. For example, like you want to see the health check of your application. So if I go to the same, right, so I will just say Actuator here. So if you see here, so if you see, with the help of Actuator, right, all these URLs are already ready for me. So if I will trigger this URL, let's say /health, and I will go here /health, so status is coming up, right? And if I want to see, let's say, all the threads, for example, right, so I can use the thread dump method. So if I will call this method, so it is showing me all the threads here. So we have the thread state, runnable, and this is very interesting information. Like I really find this information very interesting because I really like to play with threads. So this is all you can see, like your application is running, but if you want internal information about threading, right, this is the best URL you can use, thread dump. So it will give you all the things which is happening at the background. Okay. And then if you see, we have other useful features here. We have loggers, we have environment, and we have info. So if I will call info, so I've not added any info in my application properties file, but you can add that here and it will start coming. And this is also very good, beans. So whatever beans are in my project, right, so it will tell you. And let's say we had web controller, right, so it will giving me the controller /web controller, right? So the scope is singleton, all that things you can see with the beans also. Okay. And these are all the Spring Boot internal beans also, which we need to run the project. So the point is, with the help of Actuator, these all are production ready codes. I have not written any piece of code, so it all comes with Actuator package. So how to add that package? So you have to add in the pom.xml, you have to add Spring Boot starter actuator here, and in your application.properties file, you have to add this management.endpoints.web.exposure.include is equal to star. So it will include all the endpoints. So this is about Actuator. So with the help of these two lines, one is this one and one is this package, right? So all the production ready features are available to us, and the best part is you can also write your custom logic. So if let's say you want to override some method, right, so you can take a help of override here, and you can see component I'm giving, then it is I'm using inheritance health indicator, right? So in that way you can override any of that actuator, and you can build custom logic here, and you can make use of it. But even if you don't use custom logic, most of them you can use in your application the way they are. But if you want to use like inside health, sometimes you have to add liveness, readiness code, right? So you can also add that. So this is about Actuator, and if interviewer will ask, you can just give this example, like they are used to give us production ready features, like health check is there, beans is there, right, threads are there. So all that production ready features are there, which can be used to monitor our application and see the health check and see the internal information of our application, thread information, and it can be enabled with dependency, and you can write this endpoint line to enable or include all the actuators. Hi guys, so in this video we will learn about what is the use case for primary annotation and qualifier annotation and how we can use both of them. And this is also the most asked question in the Spring Boot interviews. So let's understand by coding the example. So I think that's the best way to explain you this use case. So let's say we have one interface here, right, content strategy, and we have one method, post content. So now what I will do, I will say one class, and I will say image content strategy, and then I will implement this interface. So I will implement content strategy, and whenever you are implementing the interface, you have to implement or override the method also, right? So what I will do here is I will click on implement methods. So this is how you can implement. So you see the post content, right? So in this you can give your any implementation. So let's say I will say image content strategy, right? Now I will create the another class, let's say video content strategy, and it will also implement the same interface. And I will just copy this method from here to here, right? Now here I will say video content strategy. So now you will see there is one interface, there are two classes, right? Image content strategy and video content strategy. So now what I will do, I will create one service, let's say class social media service, let's say, right? So and I will use service annotation here. So here I will have one constructor with the same name, social media service, right, which will get the content strategy, right? Content strategy. Then inside this it will set the content strategy, right? So we will set one private final variable, private final content strategy, and I will give the same name here, right? So now you will see, right, I will say this dot content strategy is equal to content strategy, and now we will have, let's say, one public method, public void post content, let's say post, right? And it will just call dot post content. So this is the method which will come from the interface, which is content strategy. So now try to understand the flow, right? So now we have one interface and now we have two classes, right? Both are implementing the same interface. Now we have one service, social media service, and it is also using the same interface, right? And here I will use auto wire. Now if you see, right, we have two beans, video content strategy, image content strategy, right? So I will, what I will do, I will use configuration here, right? And I will say class config. So in the class config we will declare both the beans, right? Image content strategy and video content strategy. So what I will say, public content strategy, let's say video content strategy, and then inside this we will just return a new video content strategy, right? And we will also use the bean annotation here. So when you say bean annotation, so we will give the same name so that the Spring Boot compiler knows. So here like this, right? And I will just copy paste this and I will say image content strategy here, and I will use the same, right? So now our code is almost ready, right? So now we have configuration, we have two beans which are qualifying for content strategy, and then we have social media service which is using the content strategy, right? And content strategy is our interface which have post content method, right? So now if I go to the main method, right, so what I will do here is social media service, right, is equal to context dot get bean, right? I will say social media service dot class, right? And then we will use social media service dot post method, right? So this is how our code looks in a single file. But of course, again, when it's a production project, you will have a different folder for service, you will have different folder for configuration, right? And then you will use a test cases to test this. But here I'm directly using the application context just to show you the example, right? So now if I will run this program, right? So I just did Maven Spring Boot run here. So if you see here, right, the build failure is there. So if you see here, right, application failed to start because of the ambiguity problem. Because social media service required a single bean, but two were found, right? Because if you see here, when we are doing the auto wired here, right, when we are doing auto wired in the social media service, they need content strategy, but content strategy have two beans here, video content strategy and image content strategy, right? That's why this is known as ambiguity problem, because Spring Boot compiler will not know, right, what bean to ingest, right? And also if you see in the logs, they will also give you solution. Consider marking one of the beans as primary, right, or using qualifier to identify the bean that should be consumed, right? So let's see how we can resolve this with primary, right? So what I will say, by default I will make the image content strategy as primary, right? So now what will happen is, if case of ambiguity problem, we are telling the compiler that use this bean as a primary bean, right? So now if I will run the same program, you will see here the Spring social media service will use the image content strategy, right? Because we are using here, so if you see here, right, so our dot post method is running, that's why that log is coming here, right? Image content strategy. Now the next question is when the qualifier annotation will come into picture. So let's say I will copy this social media service, right? And now I will say, let's say social media service YouTube, right? Now in this case, right, in this case, I don't want the primary image content strategy, right? Because it will not work for the YouTube social media service, right? So what I need to do is I need to say that for this service, the video content strategy is qualifying, right? So where I am doing here auto wired, right? So I have to use here qualifier tag, and inside this I have to qualify video content strategy. In this way, now what will happen is primary is image content strategy, which will work for all the social media services until or unless they will put this qualifier annotation, right? So in that way, qualifier have higher priority than primary annotation. So compiler knows when this social media service YouTube is working, it have to ignore primary because qualifier annotation is here. So now if I go to the main method right here, so if I say social media service YouTube, right, and then I will get youtube.class, and then I will say dot post, right? So now if I will run the same program, so you will see that for social media service class, image content strategy is working, but for social media service YouTube, video content strategy is working, right? So in this way, you can use primary annotation, you can use qualifier annotation, and you can use both when there are multiple services, right? So this is the use case for primary and qualifier annotation to solve the ambiguity problem in the Spring Boot.